So I wanted to talk about how you get the voices out of your head here and into your game. If I click through here, the challenge, of course, is to get through what we're going to talk about in about 30 minutes. And I'll hop onto the chat afterwards, and if anybody's got any questions, then I'll happily answer them there. Alrighty, so the first question I guess you need to ask yourself is whether you actually really want to do that. There are implications, there are benefits, so we'll look at that a little bit. We'll look at some key factors that you need to consider if you do want to put voice in your game, like where do you even start? What preparation do you need to do before you cast voices? How do you communicate with your cast? How do you weed out auditions? How do what sort of deadlines do you need to set? And some other factors which occurred to me that I think might be worth raising. But before I do that, this is my first time at this thing, so you might want to know a little bit more about who this Ian Russell Bloke is. Very quickly, I'll not labour this, but so you can hear, I'm British. I considered, I guess, an established game voice. So here's a list here of some of the games in which my voice features. Payday 2, I play Vernon Locke, who's the main operator. I'm in a couple of Warhammer games. I'm the player character in Chernobylite and a whole bunch of others. Big indie game success a couple of years ago, Obra Dinn. I have 2 games in that. Actually, that should say Endless Space 2. One of the factions in that is the Cravers. I play all the voices for the Cravers in that. Road Redemption, which is a Road Rash reboot. That's an Australian, kind of in the campaign. There's an Australian guy who leads you through the campaign. That's me. Pretty much I've featured in anything from small indies up to, triple A's really. I've been nominated Gaming Voice of the Year at the One Voice Awards for the last 3 years running, and I won it this year, which was pretty cool. See the little glass things over here. Also, last year, my performance in a video game demo was nominated as Best Performance of the Year. I have been cast in dozens of games. I actually help cast as well, and how that's come about. I'll use Chernobylite as my example. So I was cast as the lead character. That's a Farm 51 based in Poland, and they had all these other characters that they needed to find. And just as a part of a conversation, I said, "Hey, I've got a great network. If you need some help, I'll help you." So I ended up helping them cast, I don't know, 8 or 10 talent for Chernobylite. So it's not something I promote particularly, but it does mean that I've been on both sides of the glass. Both as someone reacting to audition requests and someone helping form, collate, and pass on shortlisted talent. So hopefully I can use some of those experiences today. So I said the first question was, do you really, really want to do this? And I think most of the time people will go, yes, I want to put voice in my game. And that's great because for all sorts of reasons, like emotional depth. There are game genres that players expect to hear voices in. If you're making an open world multiplayer role playing game, it's kind of expected, I think, that voice will be in the game. And I think it helps the people that play the game buy into the characters, because I guess of that emotional depth. It can help, a good voice can help your game become memorable for lots of reasons, and I think it can help playability. In Payday, for example, for the alternate lines, we record 3, 6, 8 different versions, depending, so that when the player plays the game, the same heist, they may get different voice lines for different situations. So it helps with the playability. It doesn't get too boring. I guess when you're thinking about whether you want to put voices into games, consider similar games that maybe you've played to the ones that you're making, where voice has been added, and see whether you feel that has either made it better or whether it's detracted from the experience. I have been heard to say that good voice can make an okay game better, and poor voice can make a really good game almost unplayable, because the players will turn off. So it is important that if you think you're going to decide to put voice in your game, that you think about those factors. Implications largely, I think, revolve around that never-ending conundrum of time and money. It's always a trade-off. Do you spend the time doing something, or you spend the money doing something? And you have to get the balance of those things right, in terms of actual physical casting, editing audio, coding into your game, and whether you need physical human help, a project manager, a casting assistant, an audio engineer. If you're, taking a human voice and making it sound more like a monster or a creature of some sort, you're going to need to do some post production, on that. So, all these things are implications that I think, as a developer or as a studio, it's important to think about those things even before you start. Okay, so we get to a point we go, yes, despite all of that, I've got the time, I've got the budget, I really want to do this, I want to put voice into my game. So what's next? What do you do next? So I think identify the scale of the task is important. Getting an idea of all the different things that you need to put in place, and to set some parameters around it. If you make it bigger than it needs to be, it's like wrestling with a snake, and it's quite a difficult thing. So important to set parameters. I would say make sure that your narrative, your story, your dialogue, that whole process is done before you start casting, so that you're ready to go. Because once you start that snowball rolling, it's going to go. You start getting other humans involved, and they're going to have expectations. So be in a position that when you're going to put voice into your game, that you're ready to audition, you're ready to cast, you're ready to record, and you're ready to pay your talent. Okay, that's great. So where do I start? How many voices do you need? How many characters have you got? What are the size of those characters? Yeah, and then how many talent will you need? You may not need one talent for every voice. You'll have player characters. They're doing the heavy lifting. They're the narrators, or the character that the player is playing. You have your supporting characters, companions perhaps, and you have your NPCs. And you may find that talent can, you cast somebody as your player character, that they can pick up, one or more supporting characters and multiple NPCs. If I can reflect on another game, Chernobylite, that I was in, I'm Igor, the main player character. I played two of the supporting characters, and I don't know, 15 or 20 NPCs in that game. So, as a talent, be aware that, yeah, and talent will be very willing to provide you with multiple voices. And I guess by reducing the number of people that you're dealing with, you simplify your process a little bit. But to manage it, you kind of need to like spreadsheet. You have to do a lot of spreadsheet. Yeah, okay, so we've got to that bit. Our stories are done. Our narrative is ready. So now we have to build a casting notice to tell the world what we want. So there are some basic things, the bare necessities, if you like. I guess if you're just a single, it's just you're a one man process, you're going to manage it. But if you're a part of a larger organization, two or three people or 100 people, who knows, then who's going to manage that process? When you're building your casting notice, you're going to want to tell people what you want. And the way you can do that is the character will have a name, maybe an age range, maybe you have an accent in mind, maybe you have a gender in mind. If you have a picture of your character, that can be very helpful. If you have some character notes, a backstory, that can be very helpful. You're going to need to decide, the sides, what your talent are going to record for you, And if they're involved in, battle scenes or something that involves effort sounds, hitting things, dying, vomiting, I had to do recently. I think, maybe get them to do some of that as well, and also tell them how many takes you want them to do, one or two takes for an audition, maybe three even. But I think if you say I'm going to take two or three takes, that you have to then accept, I suppose, that there's more time involved in that to listen to more than one take. But one of the things that gives you is the talent probably will do two very different versions. At least that's what we're often told. Do two very different versions. And you may like the second version for the character. You may not like either of those versions for the character for which has been auditioned, but you might think, oh, that'd be great for this other character that I've got. So that can help with the whole casting process. Maybe you're not sure. Maybe you haven't quite nailed down. Do you want, a British accent, an American accent, French, something sort of accentless, which is a difficult term because everybody does have an accent, but something sort of medieval, sort of not quite sure where they're from kind of accent. Any gender, and characters that identify a certain way, with LBGTQ or a person of color or this kind of thing. Make sure that these things are known to your talent so that they can react in an appropriate way. You might want to set a file naming convention, so when audio is returned to you, it's all coming back in the same way, which will help you with your spreadsheets and with filing. Typically, you'll see something like character name underscore first and last name, and maybe number of takes. And that's useful for another reason, which we'll come on to. How long will you give people to respond? I think personally, I think a week is more than enough. I think it's worth realizing that many voiceover talent have a day job, and they'll work on their voiceover stuff either in the evening or at weekends. So I think a week gives you, covers that and allows those people to respond to you. And how or where will they send it to you? Will you use a Dropbox? Will you use email? Will you use WeTransfer for big files? Will you use a Discord server? Lots of different ways. What I would say is if you decide to go down the email route and they're going to send you WeTransfer links and that kind of thing, maybe set up a separate email. Otherwise, your main inbox is just going to explode with content. So casting game name at gmail.com. You can set that up and then have everybody respond to that. Oh, hang on. That was wrong. There we go. So budgeting is another part of the whole process. You see a lot in the indie market that voice lines are paid on a per line basis, and I guess typically I have seen $7 per line, or that's right at the top end. And you see obviously per studio hour, $250 to $500 would be the sort of range that you might expect. Some talent will say it's a 2-hour minimum. And then if you want to hire union talent, this would be for union talent, it's $825.50 per hour, typically for 2 hours minimum. And if your game sells well, then you'll have bonuses to pay. I guess the whole thing, you get what you pay for applies. The best talent are busy and can afford to say, this is my rate. But I think it is worth being aware and trying to allocate a budget in advance. Talent will be appreciative of you being honest and saying, this is what I can afford. When you're working with talent, budget 4 hours for a session maximum. Or if it's a very vocally stressful situation, probably 2 hours would be fair. Be aware that, this is a muscle and wears out. Consider how you'll pay. If you're hiring just in the US, that's relatively simple. Overseas, you're going to have to need to think about how you're going to pay people overseas. PayPal is the obvious example, but it's quite expensive relative to many others. So with international uh, projects. There's a service called Wise, used to be called TransferWise. Great way of paying kind of bank to bank through a third parties and great foreign exchange rates. This is what I clicked on by accident earlier. If you want to know what other people are saying about rates, these are probably the most commonly accessed websites. Voice Acting Club has a rates, that's the indie rate guide, which will typically talk about per line rates. Global Voice Academy is a US based training organization. They have the GVAA rate guide. And Gravy for the Brain is a UK driven, although they have US and multiple other countries as well. So if you're hiring from an overseas country, if you went on Gravy for the Brain, you can choose a country in which you want to hire in, and it'll tell you roughly what rates might be expected in those countries, which may be different from. Okay, so here's an example. This is a character that I auditioned for and was cast in relatively recently. So I was provided with this picture of a sort of a cat wizard character. His name is Atreus Stone. So I look at this and I'm saying, okay, what's here that gives me clues as to how he should sound? So he's old and he's wizened. And the other thing down here is he has a sense of humor. He doesn't take himself too seriously. And then these sort of character references, Gandalf and Merlin, and then your kind grandfather, as he gives you an extra piece of pie. So it kind of suggests that they want someone with gravitas, but with maybe a slight sense of humour. This is a part of the audition side. It's the first line and the last line, but this is another little clue here. They want a performance where he's a bit grizzled, an older voice, and he clears his throat before speaking. So I don't know. I hope this will play for you. These are a couple of takes.
Greetings, Initiate. I am Atreus Stone, leader of the Ragsaka. Bring caution, creativity, and empathy along on your journey. And you may
it's coming through, but it's a little quiet.
Someday.
I don't know if I can turn it up.
Greetings. Greetings.
That's good. Don't worry, they can't hear.
I am Atreus Stone, leader of the Ragsaka. Bring caution, creativity, and empathy along on your journey. And, well, you may well change the world someday.
So yeah, just that was maybe coming through a bit quiet. But what I wanted to show there that the voice was broadly the same, but I wanted to show different emotional intent. So the second one was perhaps slightly more humorous for the first one, for example. But that's the kind of thing that you might expect to receive. Okay, so we've sent out we want to send out, we've got our casting notice ready, we want to send it out. So where are we going to find our talent would be the next thing that we need to consider. And here are all some various places that we're going to look at. Social media, I find castings on Twitter. I think for games, Twitter's a good place to put out a casting notice. When you put out your notice, put out hashtag casting call. That'll get you noticed. Facebook to a lesser extent, but there are Facebook groups that are specifically aimed towards the gaming market, and you could put casting notices up on there. There'll be plenty of voice actors hanging around there. LinkedIn, I guess, and places like Reddit, even on here on Discord, and which I think I mentioned. I've done it wrong. Sorry. Just shows we're not all perfect. Here we go. Wanted to go back a slide. My fault. You get to have a quick second look at the slides. Okay, here we are. Here on Discord, people put casting notices up in some of the servers on Discord too. Online casting platforms, the most common ones, the most high-profile ones. If you were to search Google for voiceover casting, voices.com, Voice123, The Voice Realm, Bodalgo, these are all casting platforms. Cast Voices. I point you towards Cast Voices because the lady that runs that is an ex-video game casting agent. And a lot of the talent on there are good acting talent. Freelancer sites, you might be familiar with places like Upwork, Guru, freelancer.com, Fiverr. You'll tend to find real low budget talent there. Through networking, here we are in a group of people with a common goal. And there'll be people here who have hired voices before, and they'll know good people, and they'll, I'm sure, happily refer you. You may use a casting agent. It depends on the size of your organization. Someone with an existing roster. I don't consider myself a casting agent, but even then, I have a folder on my hard drive which is specifically for casting. So I have a little curated group of people. So if someone does ask for my help, that I'm set up, ready to help. Okay, so we've sent our notice out on Twitter, or Twitter's, I can say Twitter's common hashtag casting call, and we're starting to get responses back into our dedicated Gmail account. You will get loads. Don't be worried about whether anyone's going to respond or not. You will get loads. Video games and animation are the genres which people, I think, crave most in the voiceover world to be involved in. So you'll get a lot of people willing to take part. As I said earlier, many talent can fulfill more than one role for you. So consider that when you're dealing with responses. How can you weed people out? So you've got 200 responses, let's say, and you can't, offer them all a role. So you've got to weed some out. You've got to shortlist. I think one of the first things is, what does the audition sound quality sound like? If it's a very loud environment, there's a lot going on. There's a dog barking in the background. That's one way in which you can weed people out. If they're not providing you an audition with good sound quality, then there'd be a little niggle in the back of your head about whether the final audio that comes to you will be of a similar quality. And then you've got the second thing, which is the performance quality. So you want good sound quality, and probably within about 10 to 15 seconds of hearing an audition, you'll know whether the person can provide the kind of performance that you're looking for. You can weed people out that way. And can they follow instructions? And the one that I think I see repeated most often is file naming. You've asked your talent to record the audition and to send it back to you, and you want the audio file labeled with the character name, underscore, their name, and maybe number of takes, 2 takes. The number of times that people will do it a different way. And again, the worry there for me largely is, if a talent can't follow a simple instruction like how to name a file, how are they going to react when asked to do something else? So, you want your role to be fulfilled a certain way, and there's a worry. So that's another thing. I did a casting. I helped a medical company they needed a Portuguese and a Spanish-speaking talent for a medical thing. And so I reached out to my network and I found them some talent, and they started sending auditions back to me. Probably half the files I received back were not labeled correctly. And they didn't make the cut, because I still had 20 or 30 people to send on, which was more than enough. Oh, we got this one twice. See, I can't follow my own instructions. Okay, set timeframes. So when you're dealing with responses, it's important to set timeframes. How long are you going to give yourself? So we've got a week to get all the auditions back. You've got them all. You've collated them all. Perhaps it's worth saying, I would suggest, as you receive auditions back, You're not going to receive them all on the same day or the same hour. Put them in a folder, file them, get your spreadsheets ready, but don't start listening to them until they're all in. So you can do it all in a block. So set timeframes then to review and to shortlist. So you've 7 days to get everything back, and let's say you're going to give yourself another 2 or 3 days to review and to shortlist. Then you're going to make final choices. So you've now got a shortlist. You're going to maybe listen to those again and make your final choices, maybe another day. Then you've got to communicate to your chosen talent, and you've got to send the scripts, and then you want to receive audio back. Again, I tend to be a little bit more relaxed about this, but if I send scripts to a chosen talent, I'll say to them, how quickly can you get this back to me? Within the next week would be good. That sort of thing, because you don't want this process to drift on. It's good to set firm deadlines around things, and of course you need to pay your talent. Some talent will expect and require to be paid in advance. Some, depending on the size of the role, 50% in advance, 50% in the rear. So be mindful of that too. But it's another deadline. It's another thing. I will say, if you pay talent in advance or a proportion in advance, you will get your audio back quicker. It's human nature, I guess. And then, of course, once you've received all that audio, you've got to set time aside to cut all the bits that you want and to put it into your game and to test it all. So you know more about that stuff than I do, but it's another element of dealing with that. I look like I've got about a minute left, so I'm going to. When shortlisting and choosing, don't overthink it. Make gut choices. And as I said before, 10 to 15 seconds, you'll know. Decide how many will be on your shortlist, listen to them more than once, and play them back in a different order. Because you'll play one, and then you'll go, oh, that one's no, that one's not, no, and you've set a bar. If you twist them around and send them in a different order, you'll maybe have a different response to them. So play them back in a different order the second time you read them. Listen to them. When you're recording, decide how you're going to do that. Do you want the talent to self-record and self-direct, decide for themselves the acting choices? Or do you want to direct, let them record? Or are you directing and bringing them into a studio? So you're in the same room through the glass. What format do you want? Typically 48, 44 thousand hertz and 24 or 16-bit wave gives you good quality files to work with. They're bigger than MP3s, so if you're short of space, you could use an MP3. And then post-production, someone's going to have to make it sound more like a creature or more like a whatever monster. File splitting, typically you'll ask for one file with maybe 2 or 3 takes of each line, and you'll pick which one and cut the files out yourself. If you want a talent to do that, they would expect to be paid for it. Anything from 50 cents to $1 a file would be typical. So it's an additional cost. Okay, others. We're almost there. I'm only just over, I promise. So you've got voice in your game. What if you're marketing to another country? What about localizing into other languages? Another consideration. Do you need to hire voices in other languages, or are you going to subtitle into a different language? Here in the US, Spanish and English might be something to deal with. What reach does your talent have to help you market your game? And how do they act on social media? Are the talent acting in a way in which makes you want them in your game or not? Something called GDPR, which we don't really have time to go into, but it's a general data protection regulation, which is in Europe. And if your game and the data that you hold on it is going out to Europe, you need to be mindful of the rules around that. And if you want to read more, a guy called Eric Hermanson wrote a very in-depth 4-part overview of casting into a game, which I have read. Covers a lot of the same things I've covered today, but it's written down in quite a lot of detail. So I point you to that too. That's me. Thank you. Appreciate your patience with me clicking in the wrong place a couple of times. If you want to keep in touch with me, all my socials and such like are there. If you'd like a copy of this slide deck, the Google link is there, or you can email me, ian@thebritishvoice.net, and I'll send it back to you.
Great stuff, Ian. I wish I'd had this back in the early 90s. We did our first game VO session. We put styrofoam all over the office walls, turned off the HVAC, disabled the computer fan. And yeah, this would have been very helpful then. All right. Ian will be in our Discord voice for a little bit, so pop into the questions. Ian, we hope you'll join us at Siege tomorrow. I know it's a bit of a trek for you.
To come down, assuming the traffic allows me to get there, I'll be there.
Beautiful. That's great. All right. And we'll be back in a minute with the fundamentals of game animation.
Thanks, everyone. See you.